Now we're going to go to Marilyn Young from Lark Native Plants. Native plants are incredibly important. They serve a lot of really important crucial parts of our ecosystem. And the Garden Club is planning a native plant summit in March 2024, March 4th. So you can go ahead and put that on your calendars if you want, because we're very excited about that. So more information about that to come. All right, please welcome Marilyn Young. Yep.
All right, can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for coming out today on this beautiful, cool spring day. I am loving it because, you know, in like probably 2 weeks, we're going to be in the 90s. So, well, I don't know for sure, but for native plants, you know, they really are ready for the warm weather. So I'm kind of looking forward to it for them as well, because we need some of our plants to flower to keep reproducing. And that's how we get there, is getting through our summer heat. So moving on to why we have native plants. So I started getting into natives a few years back. And it was when I moved from Jacksonville to Baker County. I'm in Glen St. Mary, and it's a different temperature, a different climate. And all the things that I brought from Jacksonville that I had purchased from like big box stores or what have you, died. So I had to kind of start over. And I said, well, gosh, you know, it doesn't make sense for me to buy the same stuff. So let me try the natives. And those I've had a lot of success with. So that kind of got me on the native plant bandwagon, so to speak. And I've just kind of continued with that and decided, when getting involved with the Native Plant Society, which has a plant sale next weekend. Those of you who don't know, it's in Native Park. They'll have great selection there as well. I learned a lot about all the beautiful varieties we have in Florida. We're so lucky to have a diverse ecosystem here. So preserving native plants is going to help not only, you know, your yard, your backyard, but it's going to help a lot of species that are out there having a hard time. So I guess the sad point, over 1 million plants and animals now are on the verge of extinction. And then a lot of that is driven by habitat loss. Basically, their food sources and their homes are disappearing faster than they can adjust. So we are trying to encourage people to help that process out by planting things that are on their diet. And a lot of the things you purchase from some of these non-native nurseries are not things they can eat. They look pretty, and they might be more durable because they don't get eaten. So you don't see the little bug holes on them like some of the native plants, but they also don't serve as a food source. So it's kind of like a balancing act. So the native plants help with preserving some of those native species of both the things that live off of them, and then also the plants themselves. So we want to keep Florida looking like Florida. And when you think of Florida, I don't know about you, but I think of things that are like the saw palmetto. And maybe, you know, when I grew up, we had wild blackberries. Used to get those darn little thorns in my fingers picking blackberries. You know, we had things in the palm trees, and we had things that when you picture Florida, that's what you saw. And we want to try to keep it like that. And if we can maybe keep some of those species that live in that environment. The other thing is, you know, Florida is one of the states predicted to be at a high risk for water shortages by year 2050. And I know we're very blessed. We have the aquifer here. We have the Floridan aquifer. We have the aquifer. But it's not without limits. And it's unfortunate that there are some people out in the world today that don't understand limits on natural resources. And having native plants will reduce the need to do irrigation all the time on those plants, because they'll adjust to your conditions, because this is where they've grown up. This is their habitat. So you won't need to use your water as much. So save the irrigation. And then slowing the wildlife losses, particularly the bird species. And I'm not in the Audubon Society, but I do get some of their publications. And about 40% of bird species have been noted to be in decline. 1 out of 8 threatened by extinction. And that would just be heartbreaking for me. I love the birds. I love seeing the birds in the springtime, hearing the birds. I think, you know, for a lot of us, that's some of the only wildlife we see these days are the birds, maybe some squirrels. So as much as possible, you know, trying to preserve some of those species, I think is definitely worthwhile. So one of the other main contributors, besides the habitats that we talked about, I've heard a statistic, something like 1,000 people per hour moving into Florida. Isn't that crazy? That's insane to me. But the invasive species are also part of the reason for some of the decline. The invasive species, what they do is they can crowd out your natives from having a home or somewhere to grow. And for whatever reason, they are prolific. The natives come here and they don't have the same predators that they had in their home countries, so nothing eats them, and so they take off when they're here. This is a picture in this slide of coral ardesia, and it is a real bad actor. So it has these beautiful fruits that birds will eat and spread everywhere. And then that's how the plant pops up all over the place. And it came into the country, as many plants did, through the nursery trade. So the specimen that you see here was found in a wooded area, and that's where I see it a lot. Even where I live in Baker County, we have that in the woods. And with the Native Plant Society, we go and we try to pull it and clean it up, but it's like a futile attempt because there's just so much of it. And it's funny, you know, we were here yesterday setting up, and the gal from the Master Gardeners, Stephanie, she said, I think we've got something mislabeled over here that says wild coffee. And sure enough, we went and looked at it, and there were 3 pots of little baby coral ardesia that someone had mistaken for the berries being wild coffee. And it's really easy to do. So I encourage you, and I hate I'm not going to throw this plant sale under the bus, but I just encourage you to be aware when you go to sales like this is, you know, look at the tag, Google the name to make sure it's matching what you see in that pot. Because these kind of sales is where I see a lot of the invasives coming in. It's illegal for me as a licensed nursery to sell something like that. But sometimes with these kind of sales where they're just volunteers bringing stuff in, you know, they don't always know. There's no vetting. So just be aware of that when you go to sales like this, to Google that name and make sure you're getting what's on that tag. Okay, so ways we can help. So there's an author named Doug Tallamy. Has anybody heard of him? Doug Tallamy. He has written a few books. Bringing Nature Home, Nature's Best Hope are 2 of the recommended readings I would suggest. And his idea is to help shrink the 40 million acres of turf grass in the US. That's a lot, 40 million acres. By turning your yard into a living landscape for nature. So in his, he has like a web page called Homegrown Native Park, and you can go on there and you can plot your property. And if you're growing natives, you can put a pin on his map and you can see how he's trying to get the whole US to do natives in your own yard. And by connecting all the yards all over the US, he's hoping to create more habitat that way. So, but turf grass, you know, it has its place. I know, you know, if you have like a need to have erosion control, grass can really be a help for that. I'm not saying all grass is bad, but there are some varieties that are better than others. Like if you want to do like a Bahia grass, that's a native grass. It can help give you that erosion control, but also it will send up that, that bee, I'm talking about, the grass bee. Bees love that. It can provide food for wildlife still and still be a grass. So there are ways to even keep a little bit of turf grass. So getting started with doing natives, I think the first thing is to check with your HOA. And I know a lot of people don't like checking with the HOA. I understand. I was a beekeeper with the HOA community, and I did not check with my HOA. Luckily, no one complained, but I understand because you're in close contact with your neighbors. Many will allow you to do, within existing flower beds in the front, and then in the back, you can pretty much usually do your own thing as long as it's not visible, you know, from the street. But check your HOA covenants. And then the first thing I would do is remove those invasives, the trees and the plants, and, you know, clear away. I know in the past, people used to say, well, I'll just burn my grass and start over. But unfortunately, a lot of times when you do that, it clears the way for these invasives to have a home to seed. So make sure you just double check that. And then I would suggest starting small, like take your existing flower beds and just insert in natives here and there so that it's not like a total overhaul at once. And it's easier on your wallet and it's easier on you if you start small that way. Because let's face it, it's good exercise to garden, but it's a whole lot of work too. Some of the preparations I would say, number one recommendation is test your soil. Get a pH test. You can do it yourself. You can buy those little things you can put in the ground. You can buy them from Home Depot for $10. It's a soil pH meter, or you can take it to a county extension office. They'll test your soil for about $3. You can then know with your pH of your soil, the plants that are more conducive to that. pH of soil in our area is mostly on the acidic side. So plants on the acidic side are things like azaleas, sunshine mimosas, things that grow under pine trees, cooney palms, you know, saw palmetto, things of that nature. The more higher pH soils are where you're going to find things like clover being able to grow. We don't have too much of that here. You know, I don't know, you know, exactly in your backyard, but it really makes a big difference to the success of your plants, not only to grow, but to be able to take up nutrients. If the pH is off, no matter how much 10, 10, 10 you put on that plant, it may not be able to take up the nutrients. So that's important to get the pH straight. Florida Friendly, I think, just had a presentation, right? So that's a source to get plants from. There's their website through the University of Florida IFAS outreach. And they have plant lists and booklets you can download. They give you maps on like where to put things so they look good. Florida Native Plant Society is also has a website, and they have a plant finder. And what I always like to do is before I like start putting things in the ground is I try to put it on paper to get like a little blueprint and create a layout with maybe some walking paths. Those are important for your maintenance because you want to have ways to get in and out to do your maintenance in your garden so you're not just in a jungle. And then try to keep some bare ground. Like this is a picture, this was actually at the Mandarin Garden Club. And you see how they've got some bare ground in between the beds. And that is really important to help, for example, some of your pollinators. Some of the butterfly species, they pick up water, not from the plant, but they get on the wet ground after it rains. And you'll see them just sitting there with their proboscis out, taking up fluids from the ground, from the pores of the soil. So they can't reach that if it's covered in mulch. So go ahead and leave a little bit of bare ground. And these are some other resources to look at when you're, when you're selecting plants. We already mentioned Florida Native Plant Society. Florida Wildflowers also has an app you can download on your phone, and that has a plant finder as well. Florida Wildflower Foundation, they have a website with many interesting articles about picking out native plants for our area, what grows here, what doesn't. And they also have a publication on there in the resource tab for 20 easy to grow wildflowers that I have linked on here. And it has, like it says, some of the easiest wildflowers that are usually pretty accessible from nurseries. And then University of Florida IFAS has another website for many native plant resources that you can go on and try to find plants as well. And I know the hard part with native plants is finding the nurseries. And as a native plant nursery, I unfortunately only do events like this. And I tell you, the struggle I have with native plants in this area is they have a dormant season in the winter and they go to dirt. So you come to my nursery in the winter, you see pots of dirt and it's really hard to sell plants that way. So I think that's why, honestly, there aren't as many in our area, native plant nurseries. You got to go south or central Florida to find more of them. But I'm happy to be here and come to events when need be. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer questions. Anybody? Oh, I must have done a great job.
Yeah, definitely give us a afterward, but we are gonna move on to the next speaker. That's okay.
Very good.
We give everyone-
Thank you.
Thank you.